I'm Sadie, and today I'm talking with Madame Onça. Onça, introduce yourself.
Why, hello, I'm Madame Onça, and I'm delighted to be here with Sadie today.
So, you are the hardest working woman in show business. What all do you do?
You mean in the before
In
times?
the before times, in the pre Rona land.
In the before times, I am a career entertainer. I've taught belly dance on multiple continents and had instructional DVDs. So that was really my sort of primary field for a long time. I'm a torch singer, songwriter. I am a published artist and author, written magazine articles, wrote a book, and made a deck of tarot cards, which is right there.
Yay!
That was a big project that continues to take a lot of my creative energy and juice. I'm a parent now. I have a micro farm, of course, because we're all trying to figure out how to become subsistence farmers all of a sudden.
Right.
And additionally, my I'm a witchy person, so I create spiritually themed creative events to bring people together, community events. My partner is an internationally touring juggler and jester, so we run history and D&D tours in Europe, so you can go to Europe and play Dungeons and Dragons and castles, and generally have international adventures. And we have a life-size human-powered hamster wheel that makes snow cones. So that's some of the things we do.
Yes. So, tarot is sort of a recurring theme in these conversations that I'm having with people.
Mhm.
So, could you share a little bit about how you came to read tarot and then come to create your own deck?
Absolutely. This is an easy question for me to answer. So I've always been a metaphysically inclined, you might say. My family were not, they were emphatically not church going people. And at a young age, I started going to churches, trying to find like the scratch that itch. Of course, as a kid, I didn't know that there were options. I mean, I knew there was, like, I tried the Lutheran option, I tried the Unitarian option, but I didn't know that there were sort of broader options. And what I really found that I loved about the going to church experience as a kid, and I actually dragged my mom to these things, it was the ritual space. It was the soaring ceilings. It was the groups of people coming together to sing together. I could have cared less about the dogma, but I loved the singing. I loved the space. I loved the cookies. I loved, so it was this sense of people gathering, the opportunity to like wear a dress, but not wear shoes. I remember actually them saying, "We're very glad you're here, but you really have to wear shoes in church." And it's like, oh man.
Well, and I feel like that's part of being from the South, too. Like,
Yeah.
the idea of going without shoes is very Southern.
Indeed, I'm a Yankee, but I was a tomboy galore, so I was like, shoes. Now of course I'm like, put on your shoes, but although today not so much.
All right.
So I had a spiritual inclination that I had to very much strive to fill myself, because again, it wasn't part of my family. They were emphatically not into the religious thing. And I found the occult and started, doing a lot of reading and adventuring and so forth as a young person. And so when I turned 21, I went through a spiritual initiation. And one of the sort of points that marked that time was, you need to go and learn some form of divination. Could be anything. Could have been dowsing, or the I Ching, or haruspicy, which is the reading of entrails. Could have been anything, but I always joke that compared to haruspicy, tarot fits much better in your rollerboard on a plane.
Yes.
So tarot was what I became interested in, and I just thought, well, I'll get the little white book, and I'll get the deck, and I'll sit down and figure it out. And that was not a direct path to having a Gnostic understanding of the tarot. I was like, how could anyone learn from this?
Right.
So as an artistic person, I thought, well, I learn best by doing and like marinating in the images. So I undertook a massive research project. It took me took me over 5 years to do the research and the work. And I worked with another woman, Jessica Juca Godino, who's just literally, we both worked in the produce department at the hippie store, and it turns out she liked tarot too. So we had a little weekly group. We'd get together, and we read every book we could find and compared notes and did a very scholarly undertaking of how the cards, what they mean, how they're used, and how their meanings have transformed over the centuries. Because of course it's an evolving art form. So in the course of doing this, I learned about the stuff, and I did it by making a deck for me. I never intended it for it to be for public consumption, but about 4 years in, people were like, well, when are you going to get this published? And I was like, I live in a yurt. I have a phone jack attached to the outside of my deck because I live in a tent and wash my hair in a bucket. Like, who would talk to me? I don't know anything about publishing. So much to my surprise, you could, in fact, send off letters and people would write you back. And I figured it out. And eventually my deck was published. But really, for me, it was just a matter of getting my elbows all the way in so that I could have a true, again, I want to say Gnostic, like a personal experiential understanding of what the cards were about. And it continues to be a source of interest for me all these years later.
Do you do daily readings?
I do not. I do daily reading about tarot, but I don't do daily readings with the cards. I have in my life, certainly, but the quarantine times are very busy.
Right.
I feel more readings for other people who are trying to maneuver in this time than I do for myself.
Right. Do people reach out to you to get readings?
They do, for sure. Yeah. I've been teaching a lot online as well. So I'm also not only helping people with personal readings as clients and friends, but also helping people deepen their own practice and answer questions that they have about how to work with the cards.
How do they get a hold of you?
Oh,
If someone wanted to learn more.
Oh, absolutely. I'm doing all of the things right now. My website is hardestworkingwomaninshowbusiness.com.
And it's down there on this slide.
That's right. And very soon, within the month, I should actually have a new website, which is theworldspirittarot.com, which is going to be the home for all of my tarot classes, videos, merch. I've got a million online lectures about things. So I'm trying to get everything in one place to really be a resource for people who are interested in learning through the lens of my knowledge and experience. Awesome. So also on the Facebooks, World Spirit Tarot with me. I am actually going to be doing next week. I will be doing some classes through the local RVA Coven. The local witch group is having me do some workshops online on Facebook. So I'm all over.
Excellent.
Is that helpful?
Yes, totally.
What else?
I met you through we're connected via several mutual
Indeed.
acquaintances, and I first actually met you in person at the festival that you've produced for 13 years.
Yes.
The Asheville Americana Burlesque and Sideshow Festival.
That is true.
Can you talk about what is involved in creating and running and keeping fresh endeavors such as that, and maybe a little bit about how you got started?
I sure can, yeah. It's funny, I can't remember when I didn't know you. You've been like part of the constellation of my adult life, for so long. It was the life in the before times when I was like a kid, and then like a sort of hipster doofus bohemian, and then by the time I like settled down to be real grown up, weren't you always there?
Yeah, I think so.
In my capacity as a belly dancer, torch singer, I was touring with a Balkan group and doing a lot of like variety type entertainment. I started AbsFest, as we'll call it for shorthand, which would be in its 14th year this year. We're this year not. I just said we're all in like frozen in carbonite for this year.
Yes.
Waiting to be thawed out. I started it. So this would be the 14th year. Again, I was very much coming from the belly dance world, which, every subculture has its own world. So as a belly dancer, I found myself sharing a stage a lot of times with burlesque performers, circus artists, variety artists, and and I love dance. I love working with people, but I envied the other performers that because they were not functioning within defined folk art forms, they had the 100% liberty to to break the wall, to climb out into the audience, to directly address not only topical issues but something that was happening in the room at the time. And I was so taken by that. It's so outside the realm of anything that you were going to learn in a dance class, where you're mostly counting to 8 or maybe 9 if
Right.
you're doing folk dance over and over, like that's your job. I was so taken by that. And I started doing more work in the variety arts world, and sharing a stage with Paula Garbanzo, who hilariously I'm now married to, and Mab, who's another fantastic member of the sideshow community. And I really learned a lot about what I'm going to call social engineering, like how you can create, you're not just there to show up and do your piece, but how as a performer, as an entertainer, and ultimately as an event producer, you're there to create an experience that is like, it's fully curated in a sense. You're not just making choices about what you wore and what we all heard, but also, about like what the tone is in the room, and, the way that the acts flow end to end, like that sort of notion of stagecraft as creating like a microcosm that you are inviting people into really, really was alluring to me. And so I decided that I was going to run, I'd already been running belly dance festivals, which were 3 or 4 day long events, with dance, music, lecture, culture classes and everything. And I wanted them to be, to have a certain feeling, very, very sort of warm and familial feeling. So I wanted to do the same thing in the variety arts community. It was very important to me to not do a competition.
Right.
Many, for anybody who doesn't know, very many burlesque festivals and belly dance ones do a competition. And that is part of the economic engine that makes the event go, because people are willing to invest in taking, in themselves, and in taking a chance of, pushing their career along, essentially, in the nature of the networking that comes out of that. I'm not here to negate that that's a choice people can make, but I was 100% not interested in creating an environment where women, people, non-binary people were pitting themselves against each other or against the game so that they could climb, win, have a fight to the death. We're already encouraged to do that as women, and to be, competitive in so many different ways and define ourselves contrary to other people, given that both belly dance and burlesque are already such glamour-driven arts, since we're trying to claim empowerment and body positivity and sex positivity. And then we're going to try to sort that out at the same time as like adding a bunch of like sort of unfettered capitalism and competition. That sounded like a nightmare to me.
Right.
So I said, no competition. We do give away an award every year, but it is a community award. It is a recognition award for people who have consistently showed up to try to be the change they want to see in the world. So we have the Phil Slomsky Memorial Artist Recognition Award that the festival gives away. And sometimes it is to a burlesque performer or a circus performer. It could be to an administrator, somebody who the audience never sees, but we know as a variety arts community is essential to helping to create the kind of community that we're willing to show up for. Mm-hmm. So the funny thing is that at the very beginning of the festival, again, I came out of, primarily the belly dance and variety arts. So I was like, I'm going to run this festival. And I met with the local burlesque performers in my community who said, no offense, but who the hell are you to run a burlesque festival? And they weren't wrong, because from their point of view, am I just showing up to wring a bunch of money out of their community? Like, they don't know me.
Right.
I knew people in the regional or the national community, but not so much the local one, because I was on tour doing stuff. And so I had to navigate that with people and say, I'm not going to accept gatekeeping on your behalf, on behalf of, this entire art form. But I do want to make sure that, local, regional, and national, and even international folks ultimately have space here, as long as you are part of being cool with each other. That's really, that notion of curation with AbsFest really came down to do you play well with others?
Right.
are you here to climb? Are you here to fight and win? Or are you here to, to savor those moments that we have backstage, or to like go and get a taco in between shows and like really connect with somebody that you don't normally get to talk to?
Right.
Like this festival will not make you famous, but it could make you your best friends.
Yeah, I mean, I've always told people that AbsFest is my family reunion, like my performer family reunion.
Mm-hmm.
And because it feels like that, and it definitely has a different feel than a lot of other festivals. And, I, it's certainly why I, found it to be my home. And that,
Sure, sure.
and not having a competition element is very much, and your reasoning for that is very much in alignment with my personal feelings on that matter too.
Right.
So,
And to be clear, like there's lots of reasons why people might do that and lots of reasons why artists might respond to that. It takes all sorts, but the sort that we are is definitely like, let's make a space to be daring and to be connected. And, for that, I needed it to be the rest of it needed to be very safe in order for it to be a place to make your art daring.
Yep.
Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you were saying that one of the questions was, how does one keep it fresh over time? And you and I both know, and perhaps some of our listeners today know that, the arts have seen a lot of change in the last 14 years. And of course, I had run belly dance festivals for years before that. So, I'm probably coming up on my 20th year of running festivals, which is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it, occasionally you have a year where you go, it all worked out, but like, am I still in love with this? Like, I love these people, but here I am, picking through a pile of receipts again and trying to get it to fit with this spreadsheet. I'm an artist.
Artists don't do math.
Why does being an artist look like being an accountant? Because I'm a much better artist than I am accountant. Right. So, I certainly have had moments of going, okay, do I still love this part enough to do this part? Especially, some years the festivals go well, and some years, you don't make money. You work all year to put other people on stage, and and it's hour for hour. It's not worth it unless you're paying yourself in joy.
Yep.
Right. So if the money or the joy aren't there, then this algebra of necessity it's hard.
Yeah.
One of the big changes that we have really navigated as a community, burlesque and belly dance both got to be a bit of a hot seat for a minute there around, inappropriately in a lot of ways, questioning matters of cultural appropriation, religious appropriation, again, these questions of body positivity, the missing stairs, like who are we secretly tolerating in the community because it's been too risky to address it, or you don't want to be the person perceived as ruining the party for everybody else.
Yep.
When you secretly know that person right there is not safe. As somebody for whom that's really important in my festival, I really struggled with that, with trying to do the right thing and also do it in the right way when the path wasn't clear. So those years, which were really painful, and I have to say almost drove me out of the arts completely because it just felt like no one could possibly pass these purity tests, no matter, am I not queer enough? Am I the wrong color? Am I the wrong class? Like, how can I be good enough to be allowed by the community to continue to perform this service? And who is it safe for me to hire?
Right.
That, and I've definitely I've at least 3 times I've hired somebody, and then between the time when we signed a contract on the festival had something come up where I was like, I'm sorry, I have to unhire you because I cannot say in print that you have a reputation for being a monster or a predator, because then it becomes a legal matter. Right. But I can say that due to current events, having you at my festival is not a good look right now. Go with the gods. I hope it sorts out. Please don't come to my event. I've had to do that on numerous occasions. And it's scary, right? Because you're usually coming up against, usually it's a man. Usually if they've gotten to the point where I hired them, it's because they have, they've got a body of work, that speaks for them, and they've got people that speak for them. And then you hear that there are people who are speaking out against them.
Right.
Right. I'm not the judge. I'm not the jury. But I am trying to do the right thing. So that was real exhausting. It was important, but it was hard because you don't want to step in it. You don't want to be an agent for harm.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, all of those things, have been really challenging over the years, trying to put our body positivity, put our gender fluidity like front and center and still sell the show,
Mm-hmm.
Especially as Asheville, North Carolina, which is the town that my festival happens in, the demographics of that town have changed from being a very local hometown freaky fest for the freaks to me curating an experience for very normal people and hopefully wooing them over to our subversive paradigm by saying, this is what you thought you wanted. And then we snuck a little bit of super fabulous, body positive, queer, awesome sauce performance art, and you liked it. Look at you, you liked it. And now maybe you'll show up for somebody else's weird show, but I had to get you in the door first. So that's been a real learning curve, is because my values have only become more subversive as I've become wiser and more experienced.
Yep. Has Asheville lost some of that weird edge that it used to have?
I would say it's still there's still a ton of freaks there. And I mean that in the most, benevolent way, like those are my people. And it is a magnet for people. We used to say, back in the day when I lived there, we used to say that, if you were from the South, you needed to get away from your conservative small town family, but you still needed to be within a day's drive. You'd move to Asheville. And then you could still go to your grandmother's Baptist funeral or whatever, but you weren't under the eyes of your family and you could go live your best alternative lifestyle.
Right.
Those people are still in Asheville, if they can afford to stay. But it has definitely, I think it's doubled in size.
Yeah.
And it's beer money. So it is, being downtown now is like, it's a Portlandia theme park for people in cocky pants who have come to see the weirdos and be like, I went to this brewery and I saw these lesbians. It's a very different experience than when there was no one else there. But it was queers and art people and college students and street people.
Right.
So with that comes money, and that's good for the city. And, it's good. I mean, there are upsides to that. It's good for the tax base, but I definitely feel like we are advocating through our performative function to try to keep the weird soul so it doesn't just become another homogenous brewery town.
Right.
We do what we can. Yeah. 2 weekends a year, I get in there and I try to shake it around normally. So hopefully I didn't break it between now and when I get there next time.
I know. How is it to be in a relationship with a person who is traveling and entertaining almost all the time? How do you navigate that?
That is a real interesting part of, what the COVID times mean for us. We joke that we live in the quarantina. So, there are 4 adults who live in this house who are full-time professional entertainers. And every one of us has been out of work during this time. Again, it's like, that's been a lot. On the other hand, my partner is never home for the month of May. Like, he is always gone for all of May. I know when you picked your date to get married, it was like a date that had special significance for you, right? Mm-hmm. Likewise, we did, because it was we got married in the end of April, which is when Virginia, where I now live, everything's in bloom.
Yes.
Feels like springtime. It's beautiful. And then in May, he's gone, and, I'm busy getting the kids through the end of school. And then there's Abs Fest, and we meet for a few days in another state.
Yeah.
Right? And then he has to leave before the festival even starts, because, he always jokes that it's like being the MC. He does all the work and then leaves, comes back just in time to find all the underwear on the stage, because he's got to go work that weekend. So an interesting thing about quarantine is that we are all here.
Right.
Carmel just came back from a month in Australia performing and got back just in time for the borders to close.
Wow.
she's like, oh, a few more days, she could have been stuck in Australia instead.
Right?
But, my partner is never usually here. So on the one hand, it's been really great that we all have more time here in the quarantina and the hive together. And we've done some very interesting projects together. And it's great to see my partner because we are blessed in that we actually really want to be around each other. It's one of those relationships that's based not just on convenience, but actually affinity. We want to be around each other. And he's excited to see his yard in May. I've known this guy for 20 years. He's never seen his yard in May. But the downside, of course, is that, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a certain element of risk. And, for adults out of work, we put in an extra big garden this year in case we need to not get scurvy.
Right.
So, but in general, I would say, I'll be very honest that having a partner who tours is, in many ways, it's really awesome because, of course, it's like, sometimes we go to the places,
Right.
We were supposed to be going this year. We were supposed to be bringing our kids to back to the UK, for this whole sold out tour that we have booked. So, sometimes it's really great. And then other times it's challenging, partly as an artist, partly as a partner, and partly as a parent. We have 2 kids. One of our kids has a chronic illness and is disabled by it, and it was a late onset thing. So it hasn't always been that way. We used to have a lot more flexibility to go and do the things together. Right. And then obviously our child comes first, and somebody has had to do all of those late night shifts and doctor's appointments and stuff. And as they said in the Star Trek movie, it's like when there's a race to win, you don't take your fastest Mustang out of the stable. So the one who can make the most money doing his thing has gone to go do the thing.
Right.
And I have dug in to do the thing that I can do, which is helped keep our child alive while we move through this time. What makes us very uncomfortable is that because of the gender bias, we're both performers, we're both artists, we both have a lifetime in the arts, but the way that it falls down is that I'm the one who ended up being the stay-at-home parent, and it just doubles down on systemic sexism, not because we believe those things, but because the economic determination really made it that way. And that's hard to see sexism play out in your life, but it's not because of any choices that we're making. It's because we're just trying to make sure that we all live.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's that. That's a very real conversation that we've had to have many times over the years. Because he wants to be supportive of me doing the thing that I do. That's, we know each other from the stage.
Right. Yeah.
Our youngest kid definitely has the circus knack. So we'll see. The older one is like, please leave me alone. My parents are so embarrassing.
Yup.
just to be clear, even if your parents eat fire and juggle swords, they're still never cool.
Yeah, they're still total nerds.
Yeah, it's totally not cool. Yeah, what else can I tell you about that? As partners, we like to be able to spend time together. We made a choice early on also to not merge our act into one thing, which again, because of the kid's illness, ultimately turns out that was a good thing. But it was calculated risk around not trying to mine all our resources in one place, because I was touring, and the whole, there was a whole national, international belly dance world. And that's where I was making my money, and he was making his money from, rent fairs and historic events. So we were working in totally different worlds. The downside is that we weren't always in the same place. Right. The upside is that if, belly dance experiences a dip in popularity, he's still making money over here. Yeah. It's very practical. Yeah. Are these useful answers?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of people are aware that many performers end up in relationships with other performers just because you end up in a relationship with the people that you spend time with. And right. But I think especially in these days, people kind of can't fathom, normal people kind of can't fathom how 2 people who make their livings in this way, that's not real. Nobody really does
Right,
that,
right. Well,
you
one of you has a real
know?
job, right? Yeah, one of you has a real job.
Yeah,
Well, there was a
somebody
funny
has
point
health
when,
insurance.
yeah, right. Well, there was a point when we were transitioning from North Carolina, where I had lived for 15 years, coming up here because my partner, he's like, I'm Italian. I like to be near my mother. So,
Yeah.
and I was ready for a change. So when we came up here, we had to rent a place. Now, I've owned a house for a billion years, right?
Mhm.
So, and he's owned a house for a billion years. So we came here and we had to rent a house, and like talking to landlords, like, of course, they're like, oh yeah, oh, this is great, this would do. And they're like, well, what do you do? And he's like, well, I'm an internationally touring juggler. And they're like, yeah, but what's your job? He's like, I'm like, to me, that sounds like the coolest job ever. Like, me, like, I'm an expert on tarot and I teach dance. What kind of dance? Belly dance. And they're like, I'm sorry, we're gonna have to rent this place to someone else.
Right.
We need some people who are like stable. And I'm like, we both own houses. Like, I've kept my children alive using the arts. Doesn't that count for something?
Right.
It just doesn't add up. A funny other thing is that I said, there are other adults who live here, and for some other folks with different, perhaps more conventional lifestyles, they're like, how can you live with other adults in your house? Isn't that weird? Like, they're not super judgy, but they're just like, let's have real talk. Like, isn't it weird sharing your house? Like, that's such a college thing to do, or such a, punk rock squat house thing to do. And I'm like, it's great, because number one, my partner is gone a lot of the time. So I would be, in this big house with these kids being like, man, I wish there was somebody who wanted to talk about not Minecraft right now. And you come down and like the coffee's already made, or you're doing your 11 millionth podcast of the week and somebody else made dinner. Like,
Yeah.
the nuclear family is a lie. If anybody didn't know, like, go look up the history of the nuclear family. The entire thing is a fabrication by the military industrial complex to make you buy more washing machines. It makes no sense outside of capitalism. And we're seeing how that structure is taxed in this time of quarantine. All these poor people who are going crazy in isolation because no one was meant to live in isolation.
Right.
Like, we were meant to live with whatever that is. But, humans have organized along tribal units,
Mm-hmm.
like it's not just you and your other gendered partner and your two kids and your dog. I mean, that's not how history has been ever. It's always been, and your mom and your niece and your niece's friend, because, they're here for the summer. Like, that's how people have been organized, because it's healthier.
Right. And you have this whole community resource to, it takes a
Yeah.
village.
Exactly. It literally takes a village, and it has. With my child, it's taken a village to help manage their condition. And in this time, like, I feel for people who are, in their apartments alone and so forth, because, now I know there's some introverts who are like, yes, my time has come.
This guy.
But for some people, they're really feeling the lack of socialization, and like, I appreciate that as an extrovert's extrovert, I have access to not just people, but other creatives on the regular, so that is an upside of the life in the quarantina. It's boring if you're a kid, because now you've got extra many boring adults around and no kids.
Right. So talk about Richmond.
Okay.
What is the arts community like in Richmond? And how did you, I mean, I know Apollo moved there, wanted to be there to be closer to his
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
But how was that adjustment with that
Well,
community?
I barely remember the before times now. Again,
Right.
because your life, the part that's coming at you is always much closer.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Doppler effect. But it was a big adjustment when I first moved here, because Richmond is much bigger than Asheville, for one thing. There's a million people in this, vicinity, as compared to Asheville, which was like 75,000 people. Where am I ever going to park? So Richmond was far more just bigger. I would say that it has a comparable amount of alternative people, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
So there's plenty here. There's a very active burner community. There's an active poetry community. There's an active historic costuming community. Like, we host a juggling festival once a year, and like, you know, 20 to 50 jugglers show up, So, if you live someplace that has that many jugglers, then, you know, that's
Yeah.
a lot of special interest. So, we really have there has been a bustling burlesque community here. And of course now as circus arts have moved out of the sort of freakosphere and into the studio environment,
Right.
there are multiple places in town where you can study pole dancing, where you can study, the art pole as compared to, like sexy pole, and aerials and sling, and, kids can do circus classes. So, I mean, it has a lot of that kind of stuff. What Richmond has that I so appreciate that I have never had anyplace else is an honest conversation about America's history of racism.
Really? How so?
Yeah, because it was the capital of the Confederacy.
Well, yeah.
So, like, there's a lot of, like, you can't pretend that didn't happen because there's dipshits downtown standing in front of the art museum with guns and Confederate flags. And you're like, well, right, because that's here. Being from the North, I mean, it's not that New England doesn't have racism, but because where I lived in a very small, I grew up on an island, and the issue was really class. It was there. It wasn't color. It was, are you a townie? Meaning from downtown, you're an urban kid from an urban environment, and you're probably Italian or Portuguese, or you are from some kind of waspy heritage, and you're from the north, from the sticks, the north part of the island, which is where I'm from. So, like, I was afraid of Italian kids growing up. It wasn't a race issue. It was a townie issue, because the kids most likely to bully me were from downtown. I didn't know we still had racism in America because I never saw it, because there were no people of color. And you didn't see it on TV as a kid. I was shocked to come to the South and be like, are we still doing this?
Right.
I had no idea. And so living in Asheville doesn't count, because Asheville, as my friend Armitage Shanks once said, he referred to it as the white hippie Valhalla.
Yes, exactly.
It's a super nice, arty little place. But again, it's like issues of, the real issues playing out in Asheville at this point, again, are class issues, as it becomes the playground of, the affluent and the retirees and the sort of high-end consumer class, as compared to the freaks, the artists, and the people of color who have been there for generations. There's a class war going on. It's not really about color there, because being part of the South, Asheville wiped out all the people of color from downtown in like the 50s, the before times.
Yep.
I lived there for 15 years and knew, less than 10 people of color, as a person downtown. It's not that they're not there, but the two worlds don't collide, or the many worlds don't collide.
Right.
In Richmond, that isn't the case, because this was one of the major slave ports, because this is where the Confederacy set up its whole, not its last place, because they ended up going in the run, and they, at the time they moved, they were like, this is the capital of the Confederacy now, as they sort of dragged themselves down. But this city, like, we have a walk here that you can do that is like along like the old slave ports and routes and stuff. So it's a much more dynamic conversation here than any place else I've ever lived. And I'm grateful to have come here at a time when my kids were old enough to start to receive that information, and in time to fire up their sense of social injustice, because there's nothing like being right in the middle of it to go,
right.
So that's been really, really wonderful for us. It's not that there's like big battles in the streets or anything. We have the same, again, the same dipshits with guns and flags that show up demanding haircuts or whatever happening right now. The Ku Klux Klan, somebody called them.
Yes.
We have those people like many other cities, but it's really just more that we have these ongoing conversations about white flight and why is this city underfunded, because all the white people moved out to the West End, so they took their tax base, leaving everybody just comes into town to go to the DMV, and you go to the theater and you go to the club, and then you go back to your nice safe neighborhood. I had never had the occasion to understand these mechanisms of American capitalism before, and it's been a real revelation.
Wow, that's interesting.
it's super interesting to me. I'm totally there for it. To the extent that, given my like lifestyle and status in life, and in fact, I will say it's probably helped inform going back to AbsFest. We liked to think over the years that we were a welcoming place. Like, we're weirdos. We're here for the weird stuff. Bring us your weird art. We're open to all of the colors and the body types and the genders and all of the things. And I really had to learn the hard way. And it's that knowing that's true isn't enough. Because if somebody from a vulnerable population shows up at your event and goes, they say they're cool, but I don't see anything here that looks like representation to me, I don't want to take a chance on being the one who applies and finds out it's not safe here. Mm-hmm. I guess this isn't an event for me, right? And living here in this city, which is so self-conscious about the reality of race relations and systemic oppression, and then the whole conversation that we've been having in the arts about representation and that we've been having about inclusivity and everything, it's really helped to further my understanding and therefore the curation of the festival as a community, mm-hmm. saying, what do we have to do to make it clear what our values are? Mm-hmm. Just knowing that we're cool, man, is not enough.
Right.
Like, how can we make it clear to the audience? Like, if you're not here for this, you are welcome to leave, because we are here to represent the weird stuff. Or you can take a chance on learning something awesome. And then how do we go out of our way to make sure that, that the performing community realizes that, we are here for our LGBTQ, performers. We are here for our otherly abled performers, for our people of color performers. Like, how can we do that? And so, it's definitely an ugly, awkward learning process and continues to unfold, but we've certainly made a lot of effort to step up and do more in the last 5 years. And I can certainly credit some of that to living here. So, yeah.
How do you communicate that to a potential audience?
Well, to be very honest, one of the things I've learned is that I try to get the audience what they think they expect. And then I also try to get them the medicine that they don't know that they need. Right. And I try to get them in the same show. So I try to get them on the same flyer if I can. I'm going to say, here is I've had an opportunity to do a lot of expensive experimentation over the years, right? As far as who we put on the flyers and how we present things. For example, one year we had Mr. Gorgeous, who is an incredible entertainer. What a charming person.
Yes.
Handsome, charismatic. He's 100% extra.
An amazing costumer.
Amazing costumer, amazing person, and just very winning. Everything about him, he looks like Clark Kent. Yes. Everything about him better. If Clark Kent was fabulous, and he was the headliner, because I was like, it's really important to me that we make it clear that the festival, that burlesque isn't just for girls. Mm-hmm. That it's here for all of the people. And he's very, very sort of out fabulous and works in Provincetown, so I want to make sure that was clear too. And I really made a choice to kind of gay up our promotional materials too. And to flip the dynamic that so often happened, where you'd have naked woman and clothed man doing the talking, right? Like, that is just either on purpose or by accident. That is often the dynamic that would unfold in shows. Mm-hmm. And so I hired 2 women to be the MCs that year. And they were great. That was Sidetrack Theater. They were fantastic. And both acts were amazing. Yes. But our attendance was lower than usual, because way less, because the public went, they even did an article in the paper, but you can't control what they put in the paper. And the article in the paper presented in such a way that we did not get those people in the door who would have been nervous to get the weird stuff. They just went, oh, that's too weird for me. And they didn't come. Instead of saying, here's my fascist beauty ideal approved starlet that is on the poster, some white blonde lady who looks very like Rhinestonian Moulin Rouge, like all of the things.
Yeah.
And then other. And I've learned if I can present with integrity, if I can present both, then some people are going to go, I don't know what that's about, but I'm here for this. But the people who are here for this are going to go, Well, that part, that figures. But look, there's my people.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I've learned that I cannot, like, I literally can't afford, because of course, when you, like at our festival, we're renting multiple venues and it's $1 zillion.
Yep. It
I mean,
is.
the orange pill's like $5,000 for the night or whatever, it's like, you need to get those people in the door, because everything else us having a place to sleep is contingent on filling those seats,
Yep.
as the entertainers. So I've learned that I really need to be like, here's the thing you want, and surprise, it turns out like you like wasabi ice cream too. But if I just present the weird stuff up front, then I can't count on getting those people in the door. So I try to get them in and then woo them into a joyful submission by giving them something they didn't know that they desperately needed.
Right
And they
on.
do. They go, this is awesome. This is the real shit, man. This is the real shit. Like, I've had some hilarious conversations with people who didn't know that I was in charge, who were telling me all about this festival and how awesome it was. Like, oh yeah, well, let me tell you something. I've been here for years and that shit is the bomb. I'm like, it's working. It's working.
Excellent.
Yeah, like I never would have guessed that by, from having started as, a scrappy, punky kid living in a yurt, to now, I wouldn't have guessed that I would have eventually had the wisdom to try to put these things together with integrity, and finding allies who can really help further the message is really important too. Like May Hemmer, is a fantastic performer. She's a performer of color with a very diverse background, both in the arts and ethnically speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So she is able to bring all of her lifetime of experience. And sometimes she can go, you don't know, but the performers of color are having their own conversation about this person and that. We feel, based on our experience, that this person is a threat, and you wouldn't know because your white lady privilege protects you from the danger this person represents. Right. And so, May is, I'm just using her as an example, but somebody who can say, I'm willing to take a chance on being honest with you about the experience of some of the vulnerable members of the community, and having that for different demographics is essential, because I can't see everything. Right. I barely see anything. I'm happy if I see the show, right?
Exactly.
Running around trying to do all the things. So building a team of people in any endeavor in life that you feel like you can, trust to see the vision that you have, whether you're running a festival or building an aerials troupe, or whether you're building a spiritual group, trying to surround yourself with people that you feel like can authentically see what you're trying to do. It's a very useful.
Yes.
I don't know how I would be able to function without those people, because they make it possible for you to do good things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. These are difficult subjects, and I won't pretend that it's been graceful the whole time. It's like, if you're a white person who has been, again, there was no racism where I grew up, because there was no race. Like, there was no tools for talking about it. Mm-hmm. And I was shocked to find out that racism, for example, was still an issue in the world. That's literally what privilege is. Like, I didn't know this was a problem because it's not my problem, right? Like, I was busy getting hassled around queer stuff and freak stuff and a bunch of other things, but I didn't have that problem. So even finding the correct language to try to address these things with humility, there's no manual that they give you that says, level up, white lady.
Indeed. Yeah.
You have to read and listen, and some of the people that will share their information with you can help you, and some just really need to hurt somebody. And trying to make the distinction between when it's you and when somebody is, when it's you and your choices, and when somebody is just angry because we're sitting on 400 years of colonialism. What part of that can I actually take responsibility for in the middle of this customer service interaction?
Right.
And still get this show started on time. It's a difficult calculation that you make all the time as a creator of space.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So Now, hopefully we have the chance to do all this again next year, because of course the festival this year should have been in 2 weeks. We had a class. Every year we try to have a free community lecture on an important subject. For example, like we had a class on the experience of marginalized people in the arts, so you could have these conversations with somebody who's like, I came here literally to help you understand what it's like to be a trans person in the performance world, or what it's like to be a person of color in this performance world, or whatever. So this year, the conversation was really going to be about making festival spaces more accessible to people who are otherly abled or in recovery.
Right. Yeah.
It's such a party space. We're here to celebrate and maybe live our most Dionysian lives, and to do
Right.
that in a way, like for a lot of people, this is their getting away, and trying to do that in a way that allows you to create the best, safest show possible, let people have the family reunion party experience they want to have, and not make it emotionally unsafe for people in some kind of recovery.
Yeah.
Again, these are very adult questions. So I was super excited to host that this year. 2021 is going to be awesome. Whole extra year to plan.
Yeah, in Atlanta, we definitely have had conversations about both of those. Certainly, accessible spaces, having venues that are only accessible by stair
Right.
is an actual thing here. And yeah, it's where the dressing room is not, the dressing room is upstairs. The whole rest of
Right.
the venue is, you can roll around, you can have a cane,
Sure.
like whatever you need. But yeah, when the performers can't go to their, designated safe space, their
Right.
transitional space, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
To literally do their job. Like, I
yeah.
need to go change my clothes now. I need to change. That's my job, is to change clothes and then come out in different clothes. Like, how do you provide for that? And when do you say, like, this venue literally can't? I'm happy to have you in another capacity and another time, but not all spaces can meet all people's needs. The same as, I can't have you do aerials in Gallery 5 because the ceiling's only 16 feet tall.
Right.
No amount of but I want to have you here at this show. Like, that limitation exceeds my ability to fix it, So but you want to know that before the person shows up, right? Like, I know that's happened to you, where you're like, I showed
Oh
up to
yeah.
do the gig and nobody thought about the fact there's no safe points to hang from, or
Yep. Well, that's why part of what I can talk to people about is preparing yourself as a traveling or guest performer, or even in your local area, to always have a backup plan.
yes.
I mean, I've been on tour and walked into venues and like, nope. Can't rig here, can't do, whatever here. And I've had to do that in shows with you too, where like, oh, this thing that I had planned out is like not gonna work in this space after all because I misjudged, or like, now that some of us are getting older,
Right.
it's
Or the
like,
vendor built a bar where there didn't used to be a bar,
right.
or for some reason the monitors are right in the space and there's no time to change that, and you never could have seen it because the venue put them there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then there's also this thing that my body could do however long ago. Today it doesn't want to, and like,
Right.
let's find another way to do it. And certainly for people who have like chronic disorders or whatever, where sometimes their body works just fine and then other times it doesn't, like that's definitely like one of the people that I've spoken with recently, she has days where she can walk just fine,
Mm-hmm.
and then she has other days where she has to be in a chair. And at this point she has almost gotten to the point where the chair has become a fantastic tool that,
Right.
And but it's also a thing to be super mindful of whenever, because she was still is sometimes a belly dancer, and got her entertainment start as a belly dancer, and
Oh,
then with like a serious injury, and there, I mean, here in Atlanta we have a whole dance troupe that is people of differing physical abilities,
yeah,
and dancing in wheelchairs and finding space to do that, and like what
sure,
kind of the requirements of your stage and access
sure.
to the stage and things like that. It's been
Yeah,
really interesting to learn more about how they work. And so,
absolutely. Just a lot more being cognizant of the things that you and I had to learn probably the hard way, which is like, oh, I should have asked if by dance floor you meant gravel.
right, yeah,
Or, yeah, we've got places to hang. You meant the pipes. And
right,
I meant, secure points in the, right, the things you just have like, oh, okay, next time I know to say.
yep,
We need, when I say accessible, handicapped accessible, I meant that I have to be able to like fit a wheelchair, and a wheelchair is X wide and needs X amount of room to swivel,
right,
Yeah, for sure. We learn as we go, right?
indeed.
Definitely. I wouldn't go back I look in the mirror and I go, whoa, this is what I look like at the age I am now as compared to before. I have those, especially now that we're all living online and you're constantly going, is that what my face is now?
Right.
I have those moments. I have a child who is a man.
Yes.
Child is a man with the beard. Like, I'm supposed to not look like I'm 28, but because that would be creepy. But it's strange to see I've outlived all my parents. But like, you see yourself change is one thing, but I certainly wouldn't give up the wisdom I have.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't give up there are good and there are hard things that have happened in my life, but I certainly wouldn't want to go back to the like, oh yeah, it didn't occur to me to ask like if the space had amplification. I just assumed it would, and now I have a show and there's
Right.
no amplification. There's things we learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, kind of adjacent to that, one of the things I often ask people is what's some advice that you've been given that's very memorable to you and that has like kind of changed how you approached something.
This one's easy. I will preface it with I am not a person who has interfaced easily with authority in my life. Right. Like, and it has everything to do with, my growing up the way I did, et cetera, et cetera. I pretty much said, oh, you can't trust grownups to really know what's going on. I'm just going to doubt everything and go my own way and hope that I'm as smart as I think I am. So that has had varied results, by the way. But so, through my whole life, I've pretty much learned things the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point when I was struggling profoundly, somebody said to me, Onça, you don't always have to do the hardest thing. And my brain exploded because in any situation, when I like, you see your life in like the reverse montage, I went, and I saw like, given, an 800 square foot apartment, I would, house, I would, say, well, it would be, we could easily fit 4 more people in here. You know what? Like at one point I was like living in my dance studio in a room, like the old future tradition. And I was like, we would have more room if we built a DJ booth on top of this. I was sleeping in a room that was 4 feet high. I crawled into my bed. If you cut your room in half vertically, you had more workable space for art above there. Put a DJ booth above the bed, which is great, except for when you're in the bed and there's a DJ and there's the dance party. I mean, it was totally a thing you could do at that moment in your life. But it's 100% indicative of like, well, if I can handle this, whatever the situation is, I'm living in my dance studio. I'll just live in half the space. I'll live in half the space vertically. I'll live in half the space vertically with a cat. Oh, wait, they were pregnant and now there's 9 kittens in here. Like, whatever it is, I always was finding a way to like, and then wondered why sometimes it was hard for me to do the things I
Right?
needed. It's like I was treating myself like a piece of coal, and I was going to turn myself into a diamond by putting as much pressure on every aspect all the time. You will always work. You will never sleep. You will say yes to every gig. You will also agree to do all of the PR for all of the things, like you have any experience with that or a college education or anything. Like I'm sure I could do more with less. I bet I could do with even less. So my
Right.
entire life up to that point, which was, 30 some years, was an exercise in putting more and more pressure on myself because I can take it. I can take it. I can take it. But at this point, I'm in therapy, right? So like maybe I can take it, but maybe it's not my job to endure. Like this, it's like I had found a way to approximate the pressures of the more difficult aspects of my upbringing by building all the pressure into my own life. Because if it's easy, must not be worth doing.
Oh, yeah, totally.
So once the fact that somebody had to say that to me it's almost embarrassing, but it like everything spun out from where there. I was like, oh, you don't have to do the hardest thing.
Right.
But I still struggle with that, where sometimes I'm like, I'd actually do a better job with this podcast if we did it on Monday and not today, because I've already got a kid's doctor's appointment and I got to do the thing and I got to do the thing and I got to build a chicken coop and I got to do the thing. Like giving myself permission to like space things out and be like the voice of reason. Sometimes I'm still like, who even am I? And I imagine that anybody who's survived either, high pressure or abusive situations, or anybody who, has a workaholic tendency may find that useful to hear. You don't have to do the hardest thing.
It's so true. It's so true.
Totally changed my life. Of all the pieces of advice I've ever gotten, it continues to change my life as I still go, right. You're in quarantine. No one knows how they're going to live, blah, blah, blah. You still don't have to do the hardest thing. How can I not make this harder on myself?
That's excellent. It's a super good reminder.
Yeah. It's, who thought it needed to be said?
Yeah.
No.
I love how I moved out here to the Pirate Bar because it was most appropriate place for me to talk to you, and it's the one time in 2 weeks that my old man neighbor is mowing his lawn.
I actually had to ask our old man to not mow the lawn during this time so that you can hear me.
Yep. On the other hand, a few moments ago, I was looking that way, and while you were speaking, a hummingbird came to visit and was like looking in the window and buzzing around the window. So you brought a hummingbird.
I did. It's that get it all done energy.
Right.
From where I am, I can look out and I can see I have 9 chickens, and they are free ranging around the yard. And chickens have very busy social lives. They have a lot going on. There's a lot of chickens have a lot to say, and what they have to say to each other is birch.
Yep.
They're very sass talking. So they're busy. They're living their velociraptor lives. And meanwhile, here's your pleasant face.
Well, on
but
that,
out there, it's all dinosaurs.
I think we're going to wrap up. So you stick around for a second, but let's say goodbye to everyone. And
okay. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Again, I'm Madame Onça. It's been my pleasure to spend some time with you here today and with the fabulous Sadie. You can find me all over the internets doing all kinds of things, but these days, during the quarantine times, what I'm doing mostly is teaching tarot online. And you can find me any place where it says World Spirit Tarot. That's me.
And at that link right down there.
Great. Follow the links.
Yeah.
And thank you, Sadie, so much for having me. And I hope that I have been adequately interesting and verbose.
Bye, everyone. And you stick around, though. Hold on. Yeah.